Welcome to the final event of Le Conversazioni 2023. This year we made 52 events, one per week, the average. And it's the end of our 18th year. We will be back here in New York at Casa Italiana in February with Rebecca Miller, but we will start in Rome on January 10th with Olivier Guess. You know the format of Six Forgotten Gems. I've asked Maaza to pick 3 films that she loves. I did the same. And since we're late, why don't we start with the first sequence, okay? It's an Italian film and a great one. So before I give you the stage, let me say that this is Adua e le compagne by Antonio Pietrangeli, a film made in 1960, written by Antonio Pietrangeli, Ettore Scola e Ruggero Maccari. It stars, of course, with Marcello Mastroianni, Sandra Milo, Simone Signoret, Emanuele Riva. It's about a group of prostitutes, but I want to know why you picked this film, and then I'll say a few things about the backstory.
Okay. The thing that first interested me about this film, I really didn't know anything about it, but was the title, Adua e le sue compagne. And Adua is, I don't know if how many know this, but Adua is the name of a city in Ethiopia. And I remember a conversation I had with a very elderly man in Firenze at some point who had mentioned in passing to me many years ago that in 1936, when babies were born, if they were female and if around Tuscany, they were named Adua in honor of the Italian fascist victory over Ethiopia, victory, quote unquote. So then I see the title of this film, Adua and her friends, and I said, oh, she must be taken from one of those babies that were born in 1936. So then I decided to watch this film to see if there was any reference at all to this, but what I found instead was an incredible film about sex workers and these laws in Rome, which you can give us a background on, the laws in Rome that had made brothels illegal in, I think, 1957.
Legge Merlin, 1958.
1958, and what it did was force all these women to leave the safety of these houses that they worked in and move into the streets that were now dangerous for them. But Adua and a group of her friends decide that they will start a restaurant in a small town. And this is where the film really begins. And I loved it.
I loved it too. Of course, they will not be able to open the restaurants, but I don't want to tell everything about the film. But I want to say something about what happened in 1960 in Italy. Because even a great filmmaker such Antonio Pietrangeli, just to give you a few titles, he was the screenwriter of Ossessione by Luchino Visconti, the co-screenwriter of Europa 51 by Roberto Rossellini, and the director of several other great films such as La Provinciale, Io la conoscevo bene, or Fantasmi a Roma, Ghosts in Rome, still with Marcello Mastroianni and Vittorio Gassman. But when he was doing Adua, Fellini was doing La Dolce Vita, Luchino Visconti, Rocco is his brothers, Rossellini era Notte a Roma, Olmi's debut film Il tempo si è fermato, Pasolini was preparing a cartone. To make a long story short, all the giants were at their best, so it was almost ignored critically, which is a pity. Yeah. But the film was a success in terms of box office. He made almost 1 billion at the time, wow. Which is huge.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
What do you like about it? Why do you like it?
The acting is impeccable. You'll see. I hope everyone does watch this film. Each of the women are given complicated lives, which is, I was really surprised by that. In a sense, it feels like it's a very nuanced portrayal of women who are sex workers. It is a wonderful and complicated look at friendship between women. The men, these are women in a world of men. And, Pietrangeli he looks at them he looks at the men in the story in quite a unforgiving way, I think. He is uncompromising in that. And really, this is a film about women and how they try to function despite everything in this world that's been created for them. Can they get out of this? Can they construct their own world in this restaurant? They don't apologize for their past, which is, I think, another thing that was great. There were a couple of the women that in the midst of doing the restaurant and cooking the food, and they're not very good cooks, you know, and they're chopping things. They're like, it'd be so much easier if we could just take the men upstairs. You know? And it was refreshing to see that. I don't want to give the end away, but I watched it again to prepare for our conversation, and I was swept away again.
Are you familiar with the other films by Pietrangeli, like Ghost in Rome or Io la conoscevo bene?
No, I haven't seen them, but I will look for them. I have a hard time sometimes finding older Italian films. Maybe you can tell us your secret.
I don't have secrets. I just go to Crichton and get the films. But what is sad about Pietrangeli, not only was practically ignored by the critics, but he died quite young in a strange sea accident. He was not even 50. But it's one of the forgotten heroes of Italian cinema. Yeah. And his son, Paolo Pietrangeli, was quite a famous, I would use to define, folk singer. I'm asking Franco, how would you define Paolo Pietrangeli? Paolo Pietrangeli, Contessa?
Oh, yes.
Folk singer is correct? Pop singer. Okay, thank you. Let's go now to the second clip, my first clip. It's by a great and famous American filmmaker, but it's one of his most unsuccessful films. So I don't know if you're familiar with King of Comedy. It was a total flop. It was such a disaster at the box office that Scorsese was literally thinking of quit and becoming a film professor. This is how tragic it was. And fortunately, he made other films and marvelous films. This is a film about a delusional loser. He's imagining this scene, never happens. And he's in his New Jersey apartment with his mother, whom we never see, screaming at him. And he's imagining to deal with this famous anchorman, played by Jerry Lewis in his best performance. And he's actually contemplating if he wants to, replace him in his show. Jerry Lewis is based on Johnny Carson, and actually Scorsese wanted to cast Johnny Carson for the role, but then he had a better idea and he asked Jerry Lewis to play the role. And according to him, meaning Scorsese, this is also De Niro's best performance. It's quite different because he's a loser, but he's also very funny. He's pathetic, and you cannot stop looking at him, although you feel embarrassed for him completely. And I don't know, again, if you're familiar with the film, what he does, he kidnaps the Johnny Carson character in order to replace him on the show. And this is his way to success, believe me or not. It is a very bleak comedy, very provocative, and very prophetic about success and fame today.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm really curious about, I'm not sure if you know, what films De Niro might have played just before, but of course I'm thinking of Raging Bull.
It's Raging Bull a year before. Raging Bull was a big success, not a big critic success, but not commercially.
And it seems like now that we've seen De Niro acting in comedies, like, what is it, Meet the Parents?
Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers.
Meet the Fockers, which...
Analyze This.
But
at the time it was not a...
No, and it's almost as if that was... It was ahead of its time. No one maybe was ready to see De Niro after Raging Bull playing a role like this.
And in a sense, this is a comedic version of Taxi Driver. Another obsessed, crazy, delusional character who ends up doing something violent and somehow becomes a star through violence, which is another typical Scorsese theme. And this is another film about New York. And there are several references to, there are a few students of mine here, to a great classic of New York cinema, which is Sweet Smell of Success by Alexander McKendrick. There are a couple of scenes, including this one, that are almost an homage to that film. I don't know if you knew this film before, but it's really disturbing and great at the same time.
That's great.
Let's go to your second film, which is something that I didn't know until tonight, basically.
Oh.
No, I knew the title, but I didn't know the film.
Great.
Let's watch it. I didn't know the film, but I knew and I know the writer, Ahmad. This film was the Sudan entry to the Oscars in 2019. It is one of the 8 films ever produced in that country. And tell me about it.
Well, I think it was sometime during lockdown. A good friend of mine who is here, Mona Al-Tahawi, and I had been asked by someone who does a podcast on films to watch this film and comment on it. I watched this film. We got ready for the podcast, and then when the time came for the podcast, the interviewer spoke through the entire show and didn't give us a chance to talk. So here's my chance. As you can see, the film is visually stunning. And every single frame is lit like a Caravaggio. It's the colors are beautiful. So this film just visually is impeccable. It's stunning. But the story, I'm not sure how much you could pick up here, is that now this little boy is fated to die at 20 because this shaman fell down at 20, and that was to signify he won't live any longer. What unfolds from there is his mother, this little boy's mother, begins basically a ritual of mourning her son from the day he's born. She dresses in all black, and she does so from that day on. And every day that he lives, she puts a mark on a wall. And so as the film continues and he's moving from toddler to grade school, she doesn't let him go play with kids. She doesn't want him to go to school. She's terrified of how he might die. And she's counting. The father in this film, the little boy's father, can't take the weight of that curse and basically runs away. And so this little boy is also told he will die at 20. And the question then becomes, when a young girl in his village that he has grown up with, at some point says, "I love you." And he says, "I love you." And she says, "Will you marry me? I will propose to you." He has to make a decision about, does he marry this woman, this young girl, when he knows he's going to die? Does he risk this? What does he do? I don't want to give it away, but at some point in the film, he meets a man that has returned from travels through Europe and Egypt, has brought reels of films with him, homemade films, but also some other films. And this is this young man's exposure to a world where, in a sense, he's ageless as he's watching these. He's not thinking about the fact that he's nearing 20 and he'll die. I think one of the most powerful parts in this film is where a really old woman and this little boy, or this young man, are sitting together. And she looks at him and she says something to the effect of, I'm the one that should be worried about dying. I'm the one that can't wait. What are you doing? And she at some point tells his mother, you have been mourning this boy since he was born. Why are you holding on to your sadness like this? I won't tell the story, but the film goes on into his 18, when he's 18, 19, and then he's 20, and I won't give it away. but it's an incredible ending.
Are you familiar with the work of the writer Mahmoud Ziada?
I know that he's done one other film. I haven't seen it, but I do want to see it.
Do you think that a director should betray the original source or should be faithful?
Oh, I can't even answer that. You know why? Because we know that things change. So no, I say that he can go. They can do it.
I think he should betray in order to be faithful.
I think so. Yeah. Especially, to the essence of a story. And I think thinking about my book is optioned for a film. You're probably tricking me to speak about this.
I am.
And
is there a director attached already?
Yes.
Okay. Can you name it?
Yes, I can. Casey Lemons, who is at NYU, and so she's also adapting the script. And I have read the scripts, the drafts, and so the question always becomes: how far can a story stray from its original and still retain its essence? And Casey and I have had long conversations, and I will say that the adaptation is obviously quite different from the book in some ways. In some ways, it takes its own turn, but there is something. It's still the book. It's still the story, and I recognize it. Yeah.
There are two different schools among the writers. One where, let's say, Philip Roth belongs, or in Italy, Alberto Moravia, and they would sell the book and ignore completely. Say, no matter what, you will be disappointed. So just get as much as you can, and that's it. And there are other writers instead who wants the filmmaker to be as faithful as possible. For example, David Mamet, or in the past, Albert Camus. Mm-hmm. He wanted to have exactly the same word, exactly the same scenes. I think the first group is the one that I prefer.
Yeah, because you're moving into a world of visual. It's a visual language, and it's impossible for a world that speaks visually to meet in every point that of a literary world. I had to, when we first started this process, I really had to tell myself that I was letting go of the book, that I had written the book, but what the director decided to do and what actors would do with it would be their own thing. So it is a new, it's not even a version of the book. It's still the story, but it's something else all its own. Yeah.
Talking about adaptation, my second choice is based on a book and is directed by a great French filmmaker, Bertrand Tavernier. Let's watch it. This is a film made in 1984. In my opinion, it's his masterpiece together with Around Midnight. And it is based on a Pierre Bost novella called Monsieur l'Admiral va bientôt mourir. And it's about this old man who knows that he's going to die soon. He's an artist, he's a painter, and he reunites his family in his country house on a Sunday. The title is A Sunday in the Country. And the entire family is quite conformist and, let's say, very boring, with the exception of his daughter, played by Sabina Zema, who gives a stellar performance, who is the revolutionary of the family, or if you prefer, the wild horse of the family. And especially the children are very fascinated by her. But after a while, you realize that she's in pain, she has a lover, and she's very unhappy. And all the facade of strength and revolution hides true sufferance. However, that pain, that sufferance is part of her life. She's the only lively character in the film. And there is another element that is very moving to me. The character of Monsieur l'Admiral is a self-portrait of Tavernier himself. He's an artist who believes not to be that great. However, he keeps shooting his films or painting his art. And this shows that he was a true artist. Of course, if you compare Tavernier to Renoir, Bresson, or even Truffaut, we're not in the same level. But he was not only a craftsman, but a true poet of the screen, maybe a small poet, but a true one. And the definition and the depiction of this woman is quite unforgettable. Did you know the film?
I don't know the film. I was just struck by the cinematography here.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. I mean, it makes sense that there's an artist's eye behind this, because the lighting and the gentleness of the tones were the things that struck me immediately.
Tavernier died 2 years ago, and together with his role as a filmmaker, he was a great scholar and a great documentarist. He made the history of French cinema through 2 long series of documentaries. And if you have not seen it, I strongly recommend. It was a real film buff.
That's great.
Okay, let's go now with your third surprising choice. Honestly, I was surprised. And I am a fan of John Woo. John Woo is from Hong Kong. He's a great filmmaker. He's a great action filmmaker. Although there are a lot of spiritual elements in his film. He's a Christian, a Protestant Christian, and for this was even persecuted in Hong Kong. But he had also a great career in this country. He made Mission Impossible 2, Wine Talkers, Face Off. Then he came back. He went back to Hong Kong. Now he's coming back again to make a remake of this film. But why The Killer?
Why The Killer?
One of the most influential action film of the last 20 years.
So the backstory for this, and then I'll talk about the new film. The backstory for this came from a conversation with the producers who are doing my book. And they happened to mention, they had just finished Oppenheimer. And so they mentioned that they had been talking to John Woo for a number of years. Had I seen The Killer? I hadn't. Well, then I should see The Killer. And they were producing the remake of it. And John Woo has been wanting to rewrite this thing for more than a decade. And finally, the right time came.
And it will be an American remake.
And it's shot in Paris. So this is an interesting thing. So the remake of this is shot in Paris. It is rewritten by John Woo, who made this in 1989, and he decided to shoot it in Paris. And the actor that plays the Chow Yun-fat role, and Chow Yun-fat in here plays the hired killer that has fallen in love with this woman that in the film is named Jenny, but I'm sure that's not her name. She's blind, and then there is the cop with a conscience who suddenly realizes that this killer and I have much more in common than these other killers that are trying to kill both of us. Chow Yun-fat in the remake is being played by Nathalie Emmanuel. If you remember, she is from Game of Thrones, and she played the attendant or assistant to Khaleesi, the young black woman. And so that's who plays the Chow Yun-fat killer role. And it is now shot in Paris. And the cop role is being played by the French actor Omar Sy. And so they have just finished the filming of this. The backstory to this is that there was a bit of a fight between producers in Hollywood. Part of the filming had to stop for the strike, but then it started up. But there's another film that is called The Killer that is coming out, if it hasn't come out yet. And then there is this is The Killer.
The one with Michael Fassbender.
Yeah.
It was presented in Venice, yeah.
So they had a fight. The producers, I know this, neither of them would change the title. And the producers for Oppenheimer were like, but this is John Woo's, this is The Killer. We had the original thing. And the other people said, we're not changing it. So now the new film that will come out, the remake of this, will be called John Woo's The Killer. And so it's coming out relatively soon. And let's see what happens. I would advise everyone to watch this. The original, which is fantastic anyway. The fight scenes are choreography in themselves. They're dance scenes, literally. But when you have a female lead that's playing this hired killer, and then you have Omar Sy playing the person trying to track her down. And when you watch the film, you realize what a complicated relationship it is already in the original. So I'm curious.
To make things more complicated, 10 years ago, they tried to make a first remake in America with an American filmmaker, very good American filmmaker, Walter Hill. And it didn't go through, so we have now finally the original remake.
Yeah, so, and I'm sure it surprised you, Antonio, because I don't seem like the person to watch.
No,
but
you don't.
This is a secret. I love these films. I watch all of them, so this, I really, I don't know why, I really like these kinds of action films if they're done very well. And this reminded me, in many ways, the elements of how John Woo created The Killer reminded me of Le Samurai.
I mean, he's a huge fan of Jean-Pierre Melville, and of course of Martin Scorsese. This film is dedicated to Martin Scorsese. And by the way, I don't know if Dado is around, but he explained me yesterday that there is a difference between remake and reboot. Now that's the Hollywood terminology. It's very, very similar, but they like to market as reboot, meaning there are little changes here and there, new life, new strength.
But this feels like a complete. I'm really interested to see the new thing. I've seen it now being called a homage, like John Woo's homage to himself, and he rewrote it. I'm
surprised by the Paris choice. I'm very intrigued.
So what does it mean to remake your own film when Hollywood is doing these reboots?
It's nothing new. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock made twice The Man Who Knew Too Much, one in England, one in America. And actually the second version, the American version with James Stewart, is better than the first one. It happens.
Yeah, I'm curious. This one has incredible roles. It's the action in it, as I mentioned, is, as you might have noticed, just the synchronicities, the emotional, I don't know, the way that this killer and this cop are so much alike is manifested in how similar their actions are. And this fight scene really showed it well. But you have, when I was watching this the first time, I was truly amazed at how at every single turn this film kept surprising me with its plot twists. It kept getting more and more complicated, and it's really a smart action film. Really smart.
And to add complications to complication, there is another film coming out called Hitman, and also that film was supposed to be called The Killer. But they say it's enough, you will be called The Hitman.
Somebody lost.
Let's go to my third and final choice. It's another Italian film, and it's one of my favorites. The first time I screened this film in my Italian cinema class, a student asked me why there is Orson Welles and why he speaks Italian. Actually, it's dubbed by Giorgio Bassani, the novelist. And this is an episode of a film called Rogopag. Rogopag means nothing. It's just Ro for Rossellini, Go for Godard, Pa for Pasolini, G for Gregoretti. And it's the only good episode in the film. And it's about this pompous filmmaker played by Orson Welles who's directing The Passion of the Christ. And he's bored. He's probably talented, but he doesn't want to make this film. And he's just imitating the great artists of the early Renaissance, Pontormo and Rosso Fiorentino. While he's shooting the film, one of the extras called Stracci means rags, who literally doesn't have money not even to have food on a daily basis, steals a ricotta. Actually, no, he doesn't steal a ricotta. Steals the dog of the lead actress of the film, sells the dog in order to buy a ricotta. And if you have not seen the film, I stop here. But in the middle of the production, there is this journalist who interviews the filmmaker. And what Orson Welles says is exactly what Pasolini thinks about Italy, about Fellini, about that, and about the rest, and about Catholicism. Let's start with Catholicism. First, he says, this film shows my profound, intimate Catholicism, and then he laughs, meaning I'm not serious about this. But then, at the end of the scene, he reads a poem which is ultra-Catholic. So what is the truth? Is he Catholic or not Catholic? Is he serious or is he lying? I don't know. Probably it's both. And, sorry, you want to... Then Fellini. Fellini was supposed to produce his first film called Accattone, and he founded a production company called Federiz, after Federico e Rizzoli. But then, after 6 months, he shuts down the production and left basically Pasolini jobless and desperate. So he was upset with Fellini. They used to be best friends, but he was upset, and that's why he says he dances. It's not a compliment. He says he's not committed to anything. He doesn't care about nobody. And then there is a reference to how Marxists contemplate death. And finally, what he thinks about Italian culture, the most illiterate people in the world, the most, how do you say, analphabeta, bourgeoisie. As you can see, he was not afraid to be controversial. The film is a film of a poet. When he was preparing his previous film, Accattone, he hired as cinematographer Tonino Dellicolli, one of the greatest Italian cinematographers. Together with Pasolini's film and a couple of Fellini, he made even all the Sergio Leone films. And the first day of shooting, he didn't know anything about movies. He was preparing a moving track, and he didn't know how to do it. So Tonino went to Pasolini and said, "You cannot do this. If you move the camera like this, then you cannot edit this scene in the editing room." And in response, Pasolini wrote a poem whose first line is "Muovi Tonino quel carrello contro natura." Move Tonino, Dellicolli, that moving track against nature, meaning I don't care. I'm looking for the truth, not for perfection. So this is the work of a poet, and a true one, controversial, crazy, heretic, moving and touching, I think.
What I found really interesting here is the book that the director...
Mamma Roma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we could talk a little about that. Is that also a message that Pasolini is trying to convey to the audience?
Yes, as we say, he started at Crichton in 1960, then it was completed in 61, then he made Mamma Roma together with, played by Anna Magnani, and then this film. And the book that he reads is the book on Mamma Roma. Together with the book and the pictures, there are several poems, including the one that he read. He was in the middle of one of the many crises of his existence, because he was attacked both by the Marxists and by the Catholics. And his response was, "I'm a force of the past. I belong to the altars." Does he make it a Catholic? Probably, but not an Orthodox one.
Yeah.
And but again, at the beginning of the scene, he smiles and laughs about him defining himself a Catholic. And then he says, "I belong to the altar. I belong to the past. I'm the force of the past. Only in tradition there is love." That's a great statement, and a strong one.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that I have not seen this film, but I have seen Mamma Roma. And
Do you like it?
I liked it very much.
The Pasolini fan don't love Mamma Roma. I do.
Yeah.
They don't love it because they say it's more a Magnani film than a Pasolini film, which is partially true.
Maybe you can tell the audience a little about it. But again, we're back full circle now. It's about a sex worker.
Yes,
it's about a woman.
Absolutely.
Ironically, we came back to that.
And it's almost a similar story. It's about a sex worker who tries to stop being a sex worker, and she doesn't manage to do so.
No.
There is also a tragedy, but we don't want to give too much. And it's played by Magnani. It was like a volcano, was a force of the nature. You cannot contain a volcano. Yeah. And so the film belongs to her.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I will watch this. It's interesting.
I strongly recommend to everybody. It's only 30 minutes, and I think it's a masterpiece. I think you saw it in my class. Did you? Yeah. Do you remember? Yeah. And it's partially in color. It starts with colors when Pasolini, actually Orson Welles recreates the Pontormo crucifixion, but then the rest of the film is all in black and white. Okay, before we go, we have the tradition, we have comic relief at the end, because for some reason we keep picking sad movies. So I want to give just a comic relief. And this time I pick an English film. I think it's one of the most hilarious films in the last 30 years. And this is my favorite moment in the film, okay? It's a surprise for you too,
Okay.
I know. It's time to go. I want to thank you all. I apologize for the delay. See you in February with Rebecca Miller here at Conversazioni. Thank you, Maaza. Thank you very much.